First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. So my title is Professor of Management at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and I'm part of the College of Management in that university. Been here for 10 years.
You've written on intellectual activism. Do you want to tell us what is intellectual activism and why it is important?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Intellectual activism has been something that has come into my radar in a specific way a few years back. So I was preparing a keynote speech for Laemos conference, and for that I was thinking about what issues I was grappling with, right? And as many scholars who are interested in critical work and engaging in critical thinking, in understanding, managing, organizing, learning practices, relations, and so on, I was really considering how does that critique translate into something that is a positive contribution to managing, organizing, learning, and so on, right? So I was, like many of us, very interested in, of course, developing all these amazing ideas that were drawing upon critical perspectives in understanding managing, organizing relations and educational relations in management, so especially management education, working, pedagogical concerns in the business schools and so on. That's also an area I was very much interested in. But at the same time, what was always a question that never really got kind of properly translated for me and properly articulated was, okay, so how do we actually make a difference, right? Which was always a concern. Of course, it is a concern of anyone who's interested in critical thinking. Obviously, there are huge number of philosophical tradition and political economy type of tradition that really address this issue. And of course, in the way we have understood it in organization theory, has always been a little bit of a concern. And actually, the only way that was often characterized as a field that was the place where we could make a difference was exactly our educational activities, right? It was always something that concerned me. Because of course I was interested in developing that theoretical contribution, but I wanted my research to matter more, and to make a difference that was beyond the fact, which is absolutely still super central anyway to my work and to my concern, the kind of educational experiences and choices that we make, right, in the way we develop management education, and therefore we teach in the business school, and what we teach and how we teach and so on. So within these kind of considerations, of course, this consideration became more and more significant, and I found a domain which was that of feminists, and especially feminist thinking that was Black feminist thinking, especially associated with the work of transnational feminists as well as Black feminists in the context of the United States. That was especially significant to me. I mean, it spoke to me because for various issues and concern, I became more and more interested in the intersection between class, gender, and race. And also because, fundamentally, I moved to a new place where, to be frank, issues of the intersection of class, gender, and race became just more salient, right? So learning about this much more significantly within the context of the United States was certainly a huge learning curve for me. And of course, it was also, the fact that I, was situated in a different place, right? So started reading about this and learned about intellectual activism, which is fundamentally a set of concepts and ideas developed by Patricia Hill Collins, which is within the tradition of Black feminist thinking and Black activism, especially in the wake of the civil rights movements, right? So it's basically historically situated, but of course it goes beyond that to include broader social justice movements, etc., but the experiences of African American scholars, especially feminists, and the critique of white feminism, if you like, and the experiences of Black women was especially significant to the development of the praxis, as well as the intellectual contribution at the level of conceptual work the people like Professor Patricia Collins were developing, right? Learning that, from that conceptual development, the experiences was extremely significant to my thinking around, okay, how do we translate the work that we do, and how do we engage in a way that makes a difference? And intellectual activism, is that. So Patricia Collins defines it as the myriad ways through which people put the power of their ideas at the service of social justice, okay? So I started, developing and thinking with these ideas. Of course, she also introduces notions that are very significant, associated to intersectionality, specifically understood as the interlocking system of oppression. So that actually creates privileges and benefits for everyone in a specific socio-historical, economic juncture. Okay, so each and one of us is situated in this interlocking system of oppression, right? Or to use another name that we used to use what I used to use with a lot of other people, was situated in specific power relations, right? So for me, those power relations became more and more, colored in specific ways. So they became more and more embodied in specific ways, right? So they became much more situated, not in a general late capitalism, if you know what I mean, but more situated in, okay, what does that mean in the specific juncture where I am situated or where I'm doing a specific research? Yeah. So everything is as if it became much more into focus. It came into focus in specific way, in ways that allow me to see much more clearly those very power relations, or understand them, articulate them, really zoom in, as well as then zoom in on the consequences, as well as thinking about, okay, what am I doing with this particular type of research, right? So because a key point of the work that Patricia Collins is doing, and the way I then, understood and, elaborated and thought about it, is that fundamentally these concerns are very much part of what I've defined as a radical responsibility. Fundamentally, each and one of us, being situated in these conditions, participates through a number of, various multidimensional praxis in ways that either reproduce a specific social order, in other words, a particular set of, system of powers, right, with the benefits and penalties that we live with and through, or we change and transform them, right? So this positioning, if you like, is something that all of us, everyone, being aware of it, being cognizant of it or not, still do. Okay, and of course, philosophically, the work of Barad, for example, has been significant in thinking about this in terms of performativity. The same with the work of Judy Butler, for example, for me, has been significant in thinking, this kind of radical responsibility in the production and the reproduction of social practices we engage with, which, of course, for us as academics, and as scholars and as educators, means the actual practices that every day we reproduce at work. In other words, what kind of research am I doing? What kind of teaching I'm doing? What kind of service I'm doing? And how, etc., etc. Intellectual activism, for me, became the space to think about those issues. And of course, it became more and more important because also we have been given the transformation in the past 30 years or so, we've become, as academics, much more, shall we say, invited to address the grand challenges that are becoming more and more significant, or wicked problem, whatever you want to call it, so that engaging with this work is not anymore a kind of, oh, you know, I'm a critical scholar and therefore I'm interested in these ideas because blah, blah, blah. But literally, there are our institutions, ASCSB, the UN, and, you know, and all sorts of various, our organizations, our business schools, the various ways through which our business schools are evaluated and accredited, asking us to develop what is called now societal impact. In other words, beyond the academic impact, in other words, advancing our disciplines and showing how our discipline is advanced by the work that we do, we're also asked to have a societal impact. So something that positively engages, if you like, the social environment. And therefore, there is an element of social change that is, you know, we are called upon to develop. And to me, intellectual activism literally is in that space, because as Patricia Hill Collins suggests, it's all well and good to talk about social change. Everyone wants to better the world, right? I mean, very few people would go around saying, I want to, you know, I actually hate everyone and I want to destroy everyone. You know, everyone from every position, even the most, you know, outrageous one, would have a kind of, you know, notion that they are doing something right. Yeah. So I think this particular version is significant exactly because it points, you know, it stresses this consideration about, okay, but what social change? So a social change is a variation from A to B or to whatever this X, where we are actually, that's what intellectual activism does directly, calls us to have that kind of reflection and deliberation on what it is, this change, you know. So what this now, and nowadays some people call it this desirable future. Okay, but what are this desirable future? Who's deciding? What are the standards? How are the standards organized? What are the processes? Who's participating? Blah, 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 right? And those questions are questions of epistemic, economic, and social justice, and they themselves become meaningful when they are associated with specific issues that to me are central to our work as educators and as academics, you know, people situated at the level of the university, which is also to advance, you know, the democratic ethos and democratic thinking. So, which to me specifically links to issues of freedom, equity, and solidarity. You know, to put it in another way, is to ask ourselves, where is the flourishing of all and not the flourishing of the privileged few, which is what those power relations constantly are reproducing, excluding certain people and supporting and maintaining and propping up certain others, right, in a systematic manner. That's why they are structural and they are systematic. So to me, I would define intellectual activism as exactly this space that has all these, if you like, thinking tools that allow you to put these concerns at the center of a praxis. Specifically, in your case, you're writing this book on research. So there are concerns associated to the research process, the research design, the engagement with the research participants, but also, if you like, from the outset, how are we doing a literature review? Who we are included in the literature review? Who, you know, what questions we ask? How do we actually design the questions? As well as later on in the writing up element of the work, right? As well as a final point, which I, you know, shall we say a loop, which we can talk about it probably towards the end, which is this element of concrete engagement, right? So the point of an intellectual activist is not just advancing the academic impact, but is directly and constantly maintaining a concern with the societal impact at all levels, right? So constantly asking yourself, in this case, I ask myself, how with my action and my activities am I doing every day, I am responding to the justice demands at the economic, social, and epistemic level that are starting with those around me. Right? Because, of course, we are always situating in those relations. So, of course, the easiest way where we can make a difference is around us. And, of course, there are conditional freedoms, you know, that some places are freer and with more possibility. There are more degrees of freedom for certain things than for others. and so on. And I think, I mean, a key point and a key lesson of this work is that is not that's why I call it a thinking tool and or a set of thinking tool and an area, because different locales would have different geopolitical, historical, institutional concerns and saliency. Hence, the kind of work and possibilities would be different, right, than the ones that I'm currently addressing myself with those, within the concerns that intellectual activism, the way I'm describing, constantly asks me to, address and consider.